Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Mahwash Ajaz. You're watching me on the Daily Diary with, yes, Mahwash Ajaz. Thank you so much for the amazing feedback you guys keep on giving us. Please stay tuned to our social media channels on Ocean News UK, and also stay tuned to Ocean News UK to keep watching the Daily Diary with Mahwash Ajaz. We always try to bring to you topics that make you think, that make us think. And today, a topic that we've chosen to discuss is also something that people in all generations think about. People in my generation, I'm almost 42, and there are things that I think that modern parenting is different than what it was maybe 20 years ago. Then there are things that younger kids think about, there are issues that younger kids are thinking about, talking about on social media, through their expressive outlets. We've invited Farzam Khan, a young Gen Z kid, to talk about this topic in particular. What are they thinking about? There seems to be a big difference between how we were parented, how we parent, and how the younger generation expects us to parent them. So Farzam, thank you so much for joining the show. How are you?
I'm doing so good. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm glad to be a part of this platform.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Thank you so much for giving us your time. So, Farzam, straight off the bat, because the discussion is pretty point blank, I'm not going to go into a lot of discussions on my own. I'm not going to go into a monologue. I am going to ask you that when you look at your parent, your mom, your dad, or your friends, when you guys sit and when you talk, what do you think parents can do better? Where do you think the gaps are between what your expectations are and what parents can do for you?
Well, firstly, starting off with my parents, my relationship has always been quite frank, and it has
Mm.
been more of a friendship rather than a father-son or a mother-son relationship. And I
Yeah,
think the same applies to my sister as well. We have
yeah.
always communicated what we want and what we feel is the right way to parent, and
Mm.
it's open communication. It's very open, it's very frank, and we discuss everything. So for me, everything is up to standard in my relationship with my parents.
That sounds
But
amazing. Yeah,
yeah,
tell
it
me.
is, it is. But the issue that I see with most of my friends and the circle around me and everyone around me is that parents don't really give the freedom that the children sometimes require. There
Mm-hmm.
is freedom is a broad term, okay? And
Yeah, I was about to ask.
freedom,
Yeah,
yeah, freedom is a very
yeah.
broad term. And freedom for most kids around me is the ability to make their own decisions in the sense that if you're studying something, if you don't want to do, let's say you don't want to go into sciences, you want to do accounting, you want to do economics, but parents are like, no, we want
Mm.
you to do X, Y, Z, and so
Okay.
you should it's basically more of a pressuring in a very toned down manner.
Mm.
So it's not exactly pressuring, but
Mm.
it's conversations which lead to the other person being coerced into a decision. And
Mm.
for them, it feels like our freedom is being taken away from us, and we
Mm.
are able to express who we truly are. And many people feel as if they are unable to be their true selves around their
Mm-hmm.
parents because
Mm-hmm.
obviously there is a huge age gap between the parents and the children, right? And
Mm-hmm.
many parents are not very understanding that
Mm.
as time goes on, people evolve, and
Yeah.
when people evolve as time changes,
Mm.
there are a lot more fields, there are a lot more things that people want to do in the future, and
Mm.
if according to them for their standard where they were born, their era, it
Mm.
it seems kind of outlandish and it seems unbelievable that how
Mm.
can a child expect us to believe that he wants to be a YouTube short creator or a person
Or
who
a
makes
gamer.
reels. Yeah,
Yeah.
but a lot of my friends, especially my friends that I made on social media myself, have
Mm.
gained a huge following on social media, and they have millions of likes, millions of shares, millions of followers, and that is how it is. This is all about the digital world nowadays, and
Mm.
it is just that parents fail to sometimes realize the potential that this new digital era holds.
That's true. For example, a lot of parents do give their children the opportunities. Sometimes those children abuse them. Sometimes the children take that freedom for granted. I'm trying to play the devil's advocate here. I'm trying to encompass as many aspects of this concept of giving your children freedom as much as possible. And a lot of times parents don't understand what children want, and sometimes children, for good reason, are unable to communicate what they need from their parents. And you picked up a topic which is very crucial, especially in South Asian societies, is about academics. And you talked about how academics are so necessary for children at that age. And then, when they get that pressure from parents, then just, the relationship sours. Do you feel that, so that's one part of my question, that sometimes, children also take that freedom, for a ride. Sometimes they're not. So it kind of creates like this really terrible cautionary tale for other parents. They're like, oh, did you see when that, XYZ parent, they let their child do whatever, and now that child is not doing anything. So these kind of tales, urban legends are also created. But then on the flip side, I also want you to talk to maybe peers in your group, like people who are watching you right now, your friends, your friends who, or people in your age group who can probably benefit from communicating better on their part. Obviously, the parents also need to communicate better, but what can kids do as well? So tell me about these two things.
Well, starting off, I think this goes both ways.
Mm,
Yes, freedom can absolutely be taken for granted, but too
mm,
little freedom can also lead to the same thing happening where the child rebels against the parents. So,
yeah, yeah.
in my humble opinion, I would say moderation is key. Everything is good when kept in moderation. There should be a healthy amount of communication from both parties. And
Mm,
the parents, obviously, as parents, should know about their child and they should know best that this amount of freedom will make my child go insane, uncontrollably insane. He won't be able to control this and he will take it for
mm,
granted. And they know, okay, if we give him this much freedom,
mm,
he will treat this nicely, he will treat this well. And
mm,
so when everything is kept in moderation, I think it's beneficial for both parties. That
mm,
is the first point answered. The
mm,
second point is that communication, usually, as far as I've seen in my peers, in my circle, in my surrounding, kids usually do communicate, and sometimes
mm,
parents communicate as well. But kids
mm,
have this fear of
mm,
letting their parents down. And this is
mm,
universal. It applies to all generations that if I don't listen to my parents, if I argue with my parents, this is another thing. It's not being able to have healthy conversations with your parents.
mm,
You need to have that relationship with your parents where you can have a healthy conversation with them, have a sit down, where it does not turn into an argument, where it does not
mm.
turn into a debate of any sort. It should be healthy, it should
Or
be
an ugly
constructive.
debate. A healthy debate is
Yeah,
okay,
yeah, a
but
healthy debate,
ugly
a healthy,
debate is not okay.
absolutely,
Absolutely.
absolutely,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But do you also feel like some parents, and South Asian parents, again, specifically because we're looking and talking about the diaspora, and we're talking about this particular demographic. When we look at South Asian parenting, and there are a lot of stereotypes in the media as well about it, that there is this concept that, and it is a reality also, that we are a bit stricter, we're a bit harsher. There are a lot of memes about it, that when a white woman is disciplining her kid and she's just like, oh honey, can you come and clean your room? And then you see the funny bit on the meme is that some mother is like throwing a chappal at her son, and then they're like, clean the room now. So this stereotype exists, and it exists for good reason. Do you think discipline is a factor that instills fear, or does it have some benefits as well? Tell me, as a young kid of today.
Well, it depends on the method of disciplining. I think that is very
The
important.
extent of it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And the extent and method both play a big factor in
Hmm.
how effective it is,
Hmm.
how it leaves an after effect on the child. I mean,
Hmm.
many people I know have been beaten up as children, and
Hmm.
they sometimes have issues growing up which lead to social awkwardness and not
Hmm.
being able to speak, not having the confidence to speak in public, not being able to
Hmm.
feel confident within themselves. It is a
Right.
problem. And
Yeah.
so, disciplining, absolutely, it has a positive effect if done correctly.
Hmm.
Again, the main problem stems down to how it is done and how much is done.
Hmm.
My parents also disciplined me, but it was never to the extent where I felt that I'm not comfortable within myself. I am not. confident with myself. I am confident, and at least I consider myself to be confident. And my parents played a huge role in that. They disciplined me, but at the same time, they made it clear that
Hmm.
I am loved and I matter as a person. My opinion matters. My parents always took my opinion in everything.
Hmm.
So, in major decision making, which was,
Which also
let's say,
impacted
leaving
you,
the
I'm
house.
sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it definitely
Yeah.
did. So it
Yeah.
was just overall, it depends on the way they do it and how much it is done. If
Hmm.
again, moderation and the method both
Hmm.
matter, and if
Hmm.
done correctly, disciplining can have a positive effect, which usually it
Hmm.
does not have a positive effect on children, and children usually rebel against their parents, which is a very
When it's
common.
overdone, don't you think?
When it's
Hmm.
overdone, of course,
Hmm.
very
Hmm.
to make that very clear. Yeah.
Yeah. So, for example, when we talk about the pressure to, there is a different kind of pressure on Gen Z kids now. There's a social media pressure. And a lot of time, kids are also taking their information, sometimes very sensitive information about relationships with their parents, with their peers, romantic relationships from the internet. And not sometimes not all sources are correct or eligible to teach our children that. But obviously, you can't really stop social media. What's your take on social media when it comes to when children in your age or younger or slightly older can still be very impressionable, can still take information, sometimes not in the best way. How important is social media? And I'm not talking about you in particular. You can give me like a bit of a cohesive or sort of a rounded up or an overview of what you see happening in your peer groups. Is that how important is that for you? Is there some kind of like an equilibrium now that the generations, the Gen Z kids have reached that okay, not everything we read on social media is particularly true and cannot replace a lot of things in real life. What's your take?
Well, my take would be that unsupervised internet access is
Hmm.
extremely dangerous. It
To
is
what age? At
mental.
what age do you think kids should have unsupervised, or a person can have unsupervised internet access?
Minimum 13. At least
Okay.
that's my personal opinion. At the age I have reached, I did
Yeah.
not have unsupervised internet access.
Hmm.
But I did have moderate access to the internet, and even
Hmm.
then, I
Hmm.
discovered a lot of platforms, a lot of places, a lot of matlab, apps and stuff. So that all led to a very broad view of the internet. The internet is very deep. It's very broad,
Yeah. It's huge.
and
Yeah.
you can stumble upon a lot of things where you're not supposed to
Yeah.
stumble.
Absolutely.
There's gore. There's a lot of stuff, and
Hmm.
so 13 is the age where I would say I reached that maturity where I could
Hmm.
understand what to do and what to not do.
Hmm.
So I would say that's pointer number one, where
Hmm.
you reach that age where
Hmm.
you can have unsupervised internet access.
Okay.
Secondly, moving on to being impressionable
Content. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
impressionable
Hmm.
content. Yeah. There's a platform called Reddit.
Yeah.
There's a platform called
4chan.
Quora. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
4chan. And so these platforms, these are basically forums. There's forums
Hmm.
of all sorts. There's Parkways
Yeah.
in Pakistan, which is for cars. It started off as a car forum and it still
Hmm.
exists. Go to the forum, you can discuss cars with everyone.
Hmm.
There's
Hmm.
forums about different things. And Reddit is a platform specifically where there is forums for everything and
Yeah.
anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when you go onto Reddit, you see relationship advices, you see marriage advices, you see this, you see that. There's
All
everything,
kinds of things. Yeah.
all kinds of
Yeah.
things. Yeah. So it is the age factor is huge when it comes to
Hmm.
letting your child have access to the internet. And
Hmm.
once you reach that age where it's like 16, you can have complete unsupervised access. 13 is where moderately you can have moderately unsupervised access, which allows you to main platforms like YouTube, Instagram,
Hmm.
so on and so forth. But
Hmm.
to deeper platforms like this, 16 minimum, because
Hmm.
obviously these things leave a huge mark if you don't know what you're reading and if you're not completely informed. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, that can have a very negative effect.
Hmm. Yeah. But at just wrapping up your thoughts and just kind of concising everything as much as shortly as possible. because we have to go on a break now. But tell me, Firzam, that if there was one thing that you would tell parents, all parents who are trying or maybe struggling with a Gen Z kid, maybe there's a communication gap, maybe there's pressure for academics, what would you say? And if you were to give like maybe three pieces of words of wisdom from a younger kid, like let's say you're talking to a parent who's struggling, who cannot communicate, who doesn't understand, the kid is acting out, maybe they're over disciplining, maybe they're doing something. So we've looked at discipline, we've looked at academic pressure, we've looked at peer groups, we've looked at the internet. Apart from that, is there something else, or are these things pretty basic in trying to get a good relationship with your parent or with your child?
All I would say, just wrapping everything up, I would say that parents need to realize that times are changing and
Yeah.
we are entering a new era.
Yeah.
And this era that we're entering, there's a lot of changes. And yes,
Hmm.
change is hard to accept, but change is the only constant. And
Yeah.
so once you realize that change is the only constant and you're moving on to a new era, this applies to the whole world. So allowing your child to have that freedom of choice, to have that freedom of expression, it should be provided to them in their own house because
Hmm.
there is a lot of outlets in on the internet where they can outlet their emotions. But
Yeah.
it is best if the child does it at starting in their own home. And so that leads to the child not being under the impression of questionable content or misinformed opinions, etc.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
just making sure your child has a comfort inside their own house.
So having confidence in your child and letting your child have that confidence in you, a two-way street. Thank you so much, Farzam, for joining us. Guys, we'll be right back after this short break, taking a parenting perspective on Gen Z. Don't go away. We'll be right back on Ocean News with the Daily Diary with Mahwash Ajaz. Welcome back from the break, ladies and gentlemen. This is Mahwash Ajaz. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Daily Diary with Mahwash Ajaz on Ocean News UK. We are talking about parenting Gen Z. What are the pitfalls that parents face? What are the communication gaps that Gen Z kids face? And before the break, we had talked to a Gen Z kid named Firzam Khan, a very bright young man who shared his thoughts about the importance of communication, the lack of pressure of academics from parents, and keeping an eye on social media. Kids these days are learning everything on social media. They've kind of become a substitute parent. And joining me with talking about this discussion is Sadaf Heather. Sadaf was previously with me talking about different other issues as well related to diaspora and parenting. Sadaf will be a regular guest on this podcast. So I'm so happy to have her join me talking about this topic. Sadaf, Assalamu alaikum. Hello, how are you? How's it going?
Walaikum salam. How are you guys? Good to be with you, Mavish.
Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you so much for giving me your time. Sadaf, you and me have talked about parenting and Gen Z and, the modern pressures of parenting so many times. But today specifically, I want to take your opinion as a parent who has been through the ups and downs of parenting in the modern age, how our parents taught us different values was very different. How we are teaching children is also very different. You're a diaspora parent, you're an immigrant parent. So obviously there are some differences in the challenges you face compared to somebody who's bringing up their children within the community. So before we get into the diaspora aspect, I want you to shed light on maybe the comparison between how parenting was done, let's say your parent or your mom and dad, and how they raised you and the values and the way that you understood values and the way that you understood world from your parents, compared to how you communicate to your children. So how do you see that difference? Does it ever occur to you that, oh my God, my parents never spoke to me like that, but here I am having this conversation in this way with my child? What's your take?
Well, full disclosure, I'm kind of second generation because I grew up in England. My
Mm,
parents brought me from Lahore to England.
mm,
So I face some of the issues that my children face as well, but not as much. I
mm,
think growing up in the 70s and the 80s, There was a lot of racism. So there was a very internalized community. And I think you can still see this in the communities in Pakistan, sorry, in England and Wales and Scotland, the UK diaspora, whereas the
Mm-hmm.
American diaspora is more first generation.
Mm.
So as far as the differences go, is we had a large extended family, and a lot of
Mm.
people in the UK diaspora, uh, they have more family there, and
Mm-hmm.
less so in America. So
Mm.
I think that my upbringing specifically, and I think a lot of people can relate, was very traditional. If
Mm.
your parents said to you that this is not what we do,
Mm.
XYZ is not allowed in our religion,
Mm.
we used to say, okay, we're not allowed to.
Okay.
So we used to say,
It
okay,
was the end of the discussion, was it?
that was it, right? I never thought about saying, Dad, why aren't we allowed to drink alcohol? And I'm talking
Mm.
specifically from a Muslim point of view
Yeah,
because
yeah.
I'm a Muslim. Otherwise, I know that there's like a lot of diasporas. There's a Christian Pakistanis and Hindu Pakistanis, so they have their own perspectives. But from
Mm.
my perspective, if your parents said you Muslims are not allowed to date, we didn't
Yeah.
ask why we were not allowed to date. We were just,
Right.
it was haram, and that's it.
Mm.
Whereas
Mm.
the Gen Z coming up, they will say, why?
Mm.
Why are you saying
Yeah.
that?
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. Explain
and
it
then,
to me.
yeah, and also,
Yeah.
I think that you cannot get away with that attitude. And I
Mm.
think this is what creates a lot of frustration in parents. Parents
Mm.
are used to being obedient to their familial wishes and the familial trajectory. You'll
Mm.
people even now. I think Hassan Rahim is a dentist, and now he's a singer,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
I was when I was in a university, I met there was a lovely Hindu girl. She was from India,
Mm.
and she was studying accounting. And I said,
Mm.
"Isn't your career dance?" She was going to
Mm.
be a choreographer because my parents said I have to do this first.
You get a professional degree first and then you do what you want. No, I completely get that. Sort of, there's also another aspect that we discussed before you joined, Firzam, who was the Gen Z kid who was talking to us about the pressures that kids face. Now, his point was, and he wasn't really doing it as a debate, he was explaining his point of view that when parents put undue pressure about academics in specific terms, if I were to say, and he was talking specifically about Pakistan as well. When you go to Pakistan or when you look at parenting abroad, are these challenges there? Like, are parents pushing their child? And you just mentioned that, there has to be a professional degree. You have to study accounting. You have to study medicine. Do you think it was there more when you were growing up and it's not there anymore? Or are parents still doing that to their kids that, hey, you have to do this and then you think about what you need to do with your life?
I think it was always there, and I think that's, to a certain extent, it is amplified by the
Hmm.
immigrant lens. When you're an
No.
immigrant, it amplifies things because
Hmm.
whereas when I go back to Lahore, I don't see
Hmm.
that. People
Hmm.
rely on generational wealth,
Hmm.
and also
And family support,
yeah,
to a
family
huge
support.
extent. Yeah.
And
Hmm.
they're not that interested in telling other people, oh, my son has become a doctor or something. I don't know,
Okay.
maybe that's my personal experience, but then Pakistan is not a meritocracy the way
Hmm.
the West is, and immigrants feel a certain pressure. I mean, you look at the statistics and you see
Hmm.
Pakistani Americans in particular are considered a model minority because they
Hmm.
achieve higher than the average American, higher than a lot of groups. And
Hmm.
that comes at a cost. I think your previous interviewee was absolutely correct. See,
Hmm.
this kind of thing can
Hmm.
work on one or two people, but not
Hmm.
everybody is, that idea
Is
of
going to be able to withstand that pressure, you're saying.
I, yeah, I think some people cannot. So
Hmm.
you'll find children that go to top of the line universities, for example, UT Austin, Yale,
Hmm.
Harvard,
Hmm.
and then they come
Hmm.
back in the next year, and the parents are like, "How dare you?"
Hmm.
Instead of thinking about the child and their long-term relationship and how their child
Hmm.
development and their will continue and their child's mental health. If
Yeah.
making someone a doctor is your main priority, fine, they can become a doctor
Mm,
at a local school, but how dare you embarrass us by coming back from UT Austin or say Harvard or something? We pay
mm,
so much to get you in. And I
mm,
think we have to be very careful as parents not to
mm.
fall into this trap because we tell each other a lie.
Yeah.
We are doing it for our child. We want them to, but there is also this thing, and children will talk back to you and they'll say, "You're doing this
Mm.
because you want to tell Auntie so and so that, you're doing this
That I
because."
went to Harvard. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And this is a problem. This is an absolute problem. But I take it the flip side. Why
Mm.
are your neighbors so concerned where your son or
About where you go to college. Yeah. So,
daughter?
Sadaf, tell me that there's also another aspect that we discussed previously. I want to cover everything possible. I know these are huge discussions, anyways. But there's also an aspect of social media. There's a different kind of pressure to conform, to become more, because let's say now there's a different kind of pressure. It's not necessarily, oh, you need to go to Harvard. I mean, that's still there. But then there's also another added pressure on kids today is that, oh, look at that influencer who's living that perfect life, or look at that TikToker who's making so much money, or look at that YouTuber who's doing all of this. Now, there are two sides to this, which I want you to address. There's one side is parents maybe need to also look at these things as career avenues for kids if they're interested in being an influencer, a YouTube person. This is something that we discussed before the break as well. So let them do that. Let them try their hand as well, because there is money to be made there. It's an income stream as well. And the second thing is, does this also not add to the pressure that the kids are facing? And how are parents able to communicate or understand that pressure that the kids are under? That, oh, this child is now looking like there are body image issues in girls. They're looking at these skinny girls, walking in slow-mo, and now they think everybody has to look like that because all the popular girls are like that. So what's your take on these two aspects of modern day parenting?
I really am scared of social media, but you have to face something you're scared of. I
Yeah.
myself am on it, but
Mm,
notice that the children will get on social media whether you want them or not. You might
yeah.
be able to filter it a little bit in the beginning, but your
Mm,
main aim to protect your child is to build up their self-esteem. And that
mm,
I think we as Pakistani parents, whether we're in the diaspora, is we have a tendency to say, we think that putting our children down will help them to be humble. And what it
mm,
and I feel there is a tradition of this. What can you do? You're not doing this. So and so's child is doing this.
mm,
Comparisons hurt children. And I think
mm,
we should try and minimize that or not do it at all. Number one.
mm,
Number two,
mm,
social media is, I think it's like a monster. And
mm.
there's no way you can, because there are a lot of parents on social media. We talk
Yeah.
about children. Parents are exposing their own children to earn money on social
Mm,
media. The
yeah.
other day, I was watching a social media post. The lady is in hijab. Her daughter
Mm,
is mentally challenged, but she's got her
mm-hmm,
daughter in shorts sitting next to her. And I'm thinking, there's all these strangers that you're allowing into your home to see your daughter, and you're trying to earn money. It is dangerous. And
mm,
apparently, particularly the newer generation of parents that have moved from Pakistan to America, they don't seem to be careful about this. They're showing
mm,
children going to sleep every event. So I'm
mm,
less concerned about the children as I am with the parents because they
mm,
know better.
mm,
As far as children goes, I think you can only build your child's self-esteem and
mm,
reassure them and keep communication lines open.
mm,
Unfortunately, we're so busy lecturing children and policing them that we forget.
mm.
थोड़ी सी दोस्ती भी लगानी चाहिए. We should be a little friendly with our child and forgiving.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, that's such a good point. And just wrapping up the conversation, when you talk about forgiveness and you talk about discipline, these two things are a difficult balance to manage. what would you say to parents? And also, what would you say? Because from when I was talking to Firzam, I asked him to talk to parents. I would want you to talk to parents also, but I would also want you to talk to Gen Z kids. And you see, sometimes you see a lot of unhappy people on the internet, which is natural, of course. There are all kinds. There are a lot of happy people on the internet. And because I'm such a I'm a Twitter beast, so I always tend to find more unhappy people because I think Twitter can be an unhappy platform. So when I see these people, and I'm like, oh my God, what is going on in their households? Are their parents not realizing what their children are doing online? So what would you say to not just such parents who are parenting such kids or the kids who are deeply unhappy with their lives, but also in general, what would you say would be like the top 2 or 3 points that you would want parents and children to remember while they are struggling to communicate with each other or struggling to manage better relationships?
Well, to Gen Z, I think they're a wonderful generation. I want to say
Hmm.
this because we often put them down, but they're wonderful. They're on their levels of entrepreneurship, they're self-starters, they're very charitable, they're very loving. I mean, and they do a lot of volunteer work, and they're very aware. But
Hmm.
I would like them to understand that their parents are going through a crunch mode, right?
Hmm.
There is a culture clash, is the main thing. Culture
Hmm.
clash for the children of the diaspora and then for the parents of the
Hmm.
diaspora. So a
Hmm.
parent, a Gen Z child, will not understand why their child is irritable, but they don't know that their mother or their father is also dealing with relatives back home, right?
Hmm.
So and so's business collapsed. So now that you have to take money out of your budget, and I mean not a small amount, huge
Hmm.
amounts in the
Hmm.
thousands, and send it back home. So and
Hmm.
so's in-laws are demanding XYZ. Otherwise, they're going to
Hmm.
divorce your sister, right? Because
Hmm.
that's
Hmm.
culture over there. And your brother-in-law has lost his job. He was doing, you were doing everything right. Your children were doing everything right. But so-and-so's brother-in-law in Pakistan gambled all the money away. Now your sister needs a house. Now, a Gen Z
Hmm.
child does not know the pressures that someone's under, right?
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
the parent is dealing with all of this, or they've got aging parents that are in Pakistan or anywhere, and they've now got to make an arrangement where someone looks after them because they have financial obligations towards the children here, but they have
Yeah.
financial obligations towards their parents and their siblings. So, and it's not just the finances, it's the time. And
Hmm.
obviously, look, and I think parents need to understand, because you've bought your child an iPhone and they go to a good school, it doesn't mean that every problem is solved. Be
Hmm.
forgiving and then be even more forgiving. I think
Hmm.
a lot of the times we are, just because your child does not become a doctor or they don't graduate on time or they don't, this doesn't mean that they are now trash, or that
Hmm.
some auntie who barely knows them asks you in a party, "Oh, what is your child doing now? My child is in Harvard." It's okay to
Hmm.
say, "Good for you."
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
don't feel that that's the end of the world, because life is a journey. People have different challenges at different times. And
Hmm.
last thing I would say is, I think there's a lot of pressure on parents. Children have a lot of parents pressure, but parents also have it. You know, if your child does something wrong, it's immediately your tarbiyat. You know, you
Hmm.
didn't bring him up right or her right.
Hmm.
Sometimes children make mistakes. Allow for
Hmm.
that, and don't blame.
Hmm.
Some things are just written.
Yeah, and then there's that blame game never really ends, does it, Sadaf? Like there's if you decide to blame your parents for everything, or if you decide to blame the child for everything, there's no end to that, is there? Just closing off, tell me this one thing that when we look at Gen Alpha, now that Gen Z is talked about, we looked at an even younger generation. This is growing up with Instagram, with Twitter and Reddit and YouTube and Netflix and a bajillion other things that they were exposed to. This is a nation of QR codes, right? This is generation of QR codes. So when you look at Gen Alpha, do you see a difference between them and Gen Z, or do you think they're pretty much the same?
I think Gen Z and I think Gen Alpha is kind of like, and this may be just my reading, but I think
Hmm.
Gen Alpha is a little bit more conservative than Gen Z.
Hmm.
they are turning back a little bit towards more traditional values.
Hmm.
Whereas Gen Z is a generation that has been conditioned by the first great wave of social media, and they
Hmm.
tend to believe everything they see on social. And
Yeah. Yeah.
morals are relative. Like you and I will say something, perhaps in your generation and my generation will say, we know that X is wrong.
Hmm.
Whereas for Gen Z, it's relative as to,
Hmm.
their main thing is don't hurt anyone.
Yeah.
They don't
Yeah.
have absolute morals. Whereas, see, and I'm not an expert, someone who is an expert would be a better person to answer, but I think Generation Alpha is slightly more grounded in religious belief rather than social media because they've seen the dangers of social media and they've
Hmm.
seen a lot of, how shall I put it, balloons pop.
Hmm.
We would
Pop right
call,
in front of their eyes.
yeah, because
Yeah.
they've
Yeah.
seen what social media created, and
Has
they
done.
the damage caused, and they've also seen a lot of propaganda that we
Hmm.
for the absolute truth now
Hmm.
dismantled, and
And it's relative. And
yeah,
it's relative also for so many people. Thank you so much, Sadaf, for giving me your time and your valuable thoughts. Thank you for having this discussion with me, which is extremely important, I think, for parents and for young children. Thank you guys for watching. That's all the time we have this week, but we will be back with more thought-provoking topics in the coming weeks. So don't forget to tune in to Ocean News UK with the Daily Diary with Mahwash Ajaz. And don't forget to like, comment, share, subscribe, and give us your feedback. Thank you so much for tuning in. Take care of yourself. Bye.